Alright everyone, buckle up because today we're diving straight into the most dangerous escalation of the global tech war so far. The chip war is no longer theoretical. It's no longer about sanctions, press releases, or political posturing. It's now about survival. Right now, the United States still appears to be ahead. Nvidia dominates AI chips. American firms control the most advanced nodes. Wall Street believes the race is already decided. But beneath the surface, something far more dangerous is happening. China is catching up. And when they do, it's game over. Not in 10 years. Not in some distant sci-fi future. But much sooner than most people realize. Let's be clear. Yes, China still lags behind in cutting-edge AI training chips. That's obvious. Everyone knows that. But that's not where this war will be decided. Because the moment China closes that gap even partially, the entire global AI ecosystem flips overnight. Why? Because China doesn't just build chips, China builds systems. Once Chinese firms reach parity, they won't try to beat Nvidia at the top end. They'll do something far more devastating. They'll manufacture at scale, and when that happens, costs collapse. Suddenly, Nvidia, AMD, Intel, their margins don't just shrink, they implode. But hardware is only half the story. The real threat is something far more powerful: Chinese brainpower. Over 50% of the world's AI researchers are Chinese. Over 70% of last year's AI patents were published in China. This isn't propaganda, this is raw data. China's AI ecosystem is massive, hungry, competitive, and brutally efficient. Their developers work insane hours, their talent pool is deep, and unlike Silicon Valley, they don't chase hype, they chase deployment. And here's the part Western tech leaders don't want to admit. China's AI future will be built on open source. Not proprietary black boxes, not billion-dollar APIs, open source models, optimized for Chinese hardware, customized for real-world use cases. That doesn't just threaten OpenAI, it buries it. Because, when open source becomes good enough and cheap enough, the entire Western AI business model collapses. So how does China accelerate this? Simple. They unleash what I call Beijing's Hunger Games. The Chinese government doesn't pick one winner, it funds hundreds. The central government is now pumping massive capital into domestic AI startups, forcing them to compete, consolidate, and evolve at lightning speed. This is exactly how China built its EV industry. Brutal competition, massive subsidies, and survival of the most efficient. Just recently, China launched 4 new state-backed venture funds dedicated to advanced technology. The national fund alone exceeds 100 billion RMB, roughly $17 billion USD. And here's the key detail nobody is talking about. This money is funded through ultra-long-term bonds. Borrowing costs are dirt cheap. Beijing can sustain this strategy for decades. They're not thinking in election cycles, they're thinking in 20-year siege timelines. Meanwhile, American chip giants are panicking, and it shows. The US strategy right now is simple: build the biggest, baddest AI model possible, AGI, Skynet, the Matrix, whatever you want to call it. But this obsession comes at a brutal cost: burn rate, capital destruction, and strategic blindness. Nvidia just made a massive, telling move. They spent nearly $20 billion to license inference technology, essentially swallowing an entire company to gain access. That's not confidence, that's fear. Inference not training is where the real battle is happening, and China has been winning that war for years. Here's why this matters. Training massive AI models is flashy, it grabs headlines, but inference is what actually powers the real world. Inference means instant responses, ultra-low latency, predictable timing, energy efficiency. China focused on this because they had to. They couldn't afford massive training clusters, so they optimized deployment instead. And that's why Chinese AI is already embedded into healthcare, logistics, manufacturing, and urban systems. The US is now scrambling to pivot, but pivoting isn't cheap. To compete, American companies must burn tens of billions just to catch up. And that leads us to the first major structural problem: manufacturing. China dominates inference optimization because it has the world's largest industrial ecosystem. The US does not. America's manufacturing base has been shrinking for years, and tariffs only made it worse. Yes, data centers are being built, but factories, not at scale. Industrial investment slowed sharply after the trade war began. Immigration crackdowns worsened labor shortages. Workforce growth stalled. and tariffs drove up costs across the board: steel, aluminum, copper, everything. AI inference doesn't just require chips, it requires factories, feedback loops, and real-world production environments. China has that. The US doesn't. And as manufacturing shrinks, the problem compounds. Fewer factories mean fewer workers. Fewer workers mean less innovation feedback. Less feedback means slower optimization. So what's the proposed solution? Automation, robots, and, yes, replacing workers. Even Donald Trump is openly talking about robotic factories, machines building machines. But here's the catch: robots don't solve the core problem, they require energy. And that leads us to the second and even bigger problem: power. AI runs on electricity, lots of it, and the US simply doesn't generate enough. China produces over 3,100 gigawatts of power. The US sits at around 1,500, and China's build-out curve since 2020 is terrifyingly steep. They're burning fossil fuels. They're installing solar at record pace. They're expanding nuclear aggressively. Beijing is firing on all cylinders. Meanwhile, America is dumping billions into AI chips that can't be fully utilized because there isn't enough cheap, reliable power. Even NVIDIA's pivot to inference chips won't fix that. Because in AI, power equals advantage. Cheap power wins. And that's before we even get to the next bombshell: silver. On January 1st, China will impose export restrictions on silver. No license, no shipment, and that's not accidental. Silver prices are approaching $80 an ounce globally and even higher inside China. Why? Because silver is essential to chips, solar panels, EVs, defense systems. China is stockpiling physical silver aggressively. Arbitrage traders are already shipping silver from London and New York straight into China for quick profits. Beijing is letting it happen for now. Corner the supply first, then shut the door. Even Elon Musk reacted publicly, calling the silver situation not good. And he's right. If China tightens the screws further, the squeeze will intensify. Does the US produce silver? Yes, but here's the problem. In North America, producing 1 ounce of silver costs nearly $20. In Asia, under $9. China's supply chains likely push it below $10 today, so China gets cheap silver while the West pays through the nose. That's not an accident. That's supply chain warfare. And this exposes the final truth. The global economy is splitting. West versus China plus BRICS. Russia and China alone control over 200 million ounces of undeveloped silver. The US has almost none. That's why Washington obsesses over Latin America. Mexico alone has 270 million ounces in one deposit. China knows this too, which is why they're active in Peru and Chile. This isn't ideology, it's geology. And commodities will be the battleground of 2026. Data centers, EVs, chips, they all depend on raw materials. Silver's surge past its 2011 highs isn't speculation, it's structural. China has been preparing for this for decades. The Belt and Road wasn't just about trade, it was about control, ports, supply routes, commodities. That's why China built megaports like Chancay in Peru to secure copper, lithium, soy, and silver. The US will respond, but it will require massive spending. Money the US doesn't have. So what happens next? Printing, inflation, debt expansion, gold and silver rise, the dollar weakens, and the tech war escalates further. So let me ask you, can the US really catch up in inference chips, and will China tighten the silver noose even more? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Smash the like button, subscribe, and stay tuned because the next phase of this war is just beginning.